Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the match preview with me, Andrew Musgrove, joined by John Gibson as usual. Newcastle head down to the Etihad on Saturday for a good old 3 p.m. kickoff against Manchester City. We're here to talk about who might start for Newcastle United and what we expect from the game down in the Northwest. As usual, this episode is sponsored by NordVPN. A big thanks to them. Hit the link in the podcast description box to get your heavily discounted plan starting at just £2.22 with a few extra months chucked in on the plan as well. Protect yourselves and support the podcast. John, welcome back to the podcast. We've just recorded a lovely tribute to John Tudor, which went out on Wednesday evening. If you haven't seen it already, guys, if you haven't listened to it, John, just briefly explain to our viewers and listeners why they should go back and check it out.
Because this is a very, very special guy in our history. At a time where football was all about twin centre forwards, he dovetailed with Malcolm MacDonald like fish and chips, like Shearer and Ferdinand, like Jackie Milburn and George Robledo. They were absolutely perfect for each other because Malcolm, and I say this as a dear friend and somebody I love, had a terrific ego, and quite rightly so. And this guy, John Tudor, was devoid of an ego, and therefore they went together so well and were so good for each other. Um, Vastly underrated by some people, but certainly not by Supermac. He was a joy to know and a joy to work with, and he went with me to the 1974 World Cup finals just a couple of months after the 74 FA Cup final, and has stayed a friend throughout all his time in America. Dearly loved by everybody that's known him. And I think by fathers and sons, Newcastle United fans realise what he means in our history. An extra special man, my privilege to have known him, everybody's privilege to have watched him play.
Yeah, indeed. So go and check that tribute out. Perfectly delivered there by Gibbo. Manchester City, then, John, the opposition this Saturday, as we said, a 3 p.m. kickoff down at the Etihad. And Newcastle United should go into this full of high spirits, having got through the Battle of St Andrews against Birmingham City in the FA Cup and landed themselves a draw against Brighton in the next round. You contrast that to Manchester City's mood, and while their form's picked up a little bit, I'm sure the last gasp defeat to Real Madrid in the Champions League on Tuesday night probably doesn't set them up too kindly for this game on the weekend.
Oh, without a shadow of doubt. I mean, Manchester City don't terrify teams anymore like they did when they were invincible or appeared invincible when they were winning the Premier League title season upon season upon season upon season. Don't get me wrong, they're exceptionally dangerous. Of course they are because they've got quality players, but they don't terrify you. You don't lie awake at night before the game the next day. I think they took the eye off the ball. It's very easy to do when you have as much success as they had. And it almost crept up on them that some of the players all got old together. Um, De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Goodalon, Kyle Walker, who's gone out into retirement in Italy, all stupendous players, but of all, and De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, still capable on the day of producing flashes of absolute brilliance, but aren't in that pump like they were then. Of course, they've got Holland, they've got Foden, they've got good players. They've spent 120 million in January just to try to put this all right, but they're not the team they were. Um, I mean, stats which you love throwing at me, but I'll throw at you here because I think it shows that if anything, Newcastle are currently on an upward trend, and Manchester City are currently on a downward trend. I mean, Newcastle have won 12 of their last 14 games in all competitions. Manchester City have lost 12 of their last 24 in all competitions, culminating in the Real Madrid. Now, that is really a killer for them because they were 2-1 up with 5 minutes to go, and we still wondered whether that was enough of a lead to take the Bernabeu next week, but they were 2-1 up. And 5 minutes later, they were 3-2 down, and it was their 12th defeat in the last 24 games. Now, that is a killer. That is going to really hurt them. It's going to throw doubts in the dressing room and on the terraces in both cases. Now, I stress I'm not underestimating Manchester City because they've got quality. And if we take the eye on the ball, look at massacres because they want to. And anybody that's got Haaland's going to score goals. And they've got Foden and other players as well. The point is, though, once upon a time, you went to Manchester City for damage limitation. You no longer go to Manchester City for damage limitation. You go there thinking, we're going to get something. A draw or win, we can get something. And if they've got players like Haaland and Foden that we've got to worry about, we've got players like Isaac and Gordon and Bruno and Tonali that they've got to worry about. So it is tight match because incredibly, if you look at the Premier League table, our two records are literally exactly the same. We've both won 12, we've both drawn 5, and we've both lost 7. And unbelievably, we've both got the same goal difference, 13. I mean, we're locked together. They're just above us because M comes before N in for the league table. But it's very, very tight. We are going for a 7th away win on the trot. I mean, that's unbelievable. And we would never have contemplated it at Manchester City, but it's a possibility. It's a possibility. We no longer walk in fear. We walk with some feeling of there's something to be got here. And as long as you match them on endeavour and you quieten the crowd down and you make them nervous early on and you don't present them with a goal and you keep going, they get done at the death now, you know. They get done at the death. They can't see out games. I'm not making it sound easy. I'm just not making it what it was last season or the season before or the season before that. I know we've got a horrible record there, but records are meant to be broken. And our horrible record's based on a different Man City side it is now. It's got a bit of a soft underbelly at the moment, and it's up to us to exploit that.
Certainly so. You mentioned there the record. Man City have lost just one of their last 34 Premier League games against Newcastle United. And Newcastle have lost their last 15 Premier League away games against Manchester City, failing to score in any of their last 5. Those two stats there are very daunting. But what gives me a lot of hope about Saturday, and you're right, it's not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. We're not underestimating them. But this season, we have seen Newcastle United rid themselves of several records that have cast a shadow over them. Old Trafford, Tottenham, Arsenal in the League Cup. This season, it maybe hasn't gone quite to plan. The consistency before this winning run wasn't quite there. In the last few weeks, especially in the league, haven't been what we've come to expect of Newcastle United. But in terms of going up against the so-called big sides where they've had a horrendous time of it in recent seasons, Newcastle United seem to be in the mood to get rid of that, or to get that monkey off their back. And there's no reason why they can't do that against City on Saturday.
No, I mean the second most successful side in England is Arsenal, who have finished runners up to Manchester City in the last couple of seasons, and now are above Manchester City in the league. We've played them 3 times this season, and we've won 3 times. So we're no longer afraid of the big clubs. We've beaten Spurs home and away. We've beaten Man U. Nottingham Forest up there is the killer side of the season, and they're wonderful. We've beaten them twice at their place. We've knocked them out the League Cup there, and we've beat them 3-1 in the league there. So we have no reason to be afraid. But equally, we've got no reason to think it's a stroll in the park because it isn't a stroll in the park. And they are still Manchester City. But as I've said before, I've used the phrase before, Andrew, let's play the team. Let's not play the badge. If we play the team, we're playing a vulnerable team with an underbelly. If we're playing the badge, we're playing the 5 times Premier League champions who have won the European Cup during Champions League during this time, and domestic trophies, etc., etc. But let's play the team in front of us, and not the badge.
Yeah, indeed. You said that kind of every time we've talked about playing the so-called big sides, and
Yeah,
for the best part, it's absolutely worked, and it is definitely the right attitude to take into the game. I mean, look, I'd be a little bit more confident as well if it wasn't for the injury to Dan Burn. Obviously, we're recording this before Eddie Howe's press conference on Friday, and as you will always say, John, Eddie Howe can say one thing, and then Saturday Dan Burn still manages to play. But it is a worry, and Eddie Howe came out and said it's a big concern. Dan Burn's not a man to come off for a small reason. He quite clearly made the point that his groin had gone. If he's missing on Saturday, given that Botman is nursing what appears to be a knee injury, which might keep him out, Lascelles isn't back, Lloyd Kelly's gone, Alex Murphy's out on loan. How big of a blow would it be to lose Dan Burn, given that they've not really got anyone to replace him either?
huge blow because Dan Burn is having his best season since he come to Newcastle. He's been absolutely outstanding, game after game after game. Botman's come back from a long injury and has been terrific, both standing in as left sider and playing on the right side alongside Burn. Now, to lose both of them at City, and I've still got a hope that one of them, at least one of them, will make it. I've got to hope that that's so. I'm not writing them off yet, um, but it would be a massive blow. I mean, we could manage perhaps because we would probably go with Kraft and Shaw as the two centre halves, who wouldn't let us down. But we're talking Haaland here. We're not talking about anybody. We're talking about Erling Haaland, who's got so many goals and regularly has, and scored two against Real Madrid. Um, so we desperately need one of them there. Injuries is always the thing that worries us with Newcastle. We've lost Joe Linton. We could lose one centre half. We could lose two centre halves. We lost Pope. We've managed to keep going through all those. But as I've said, and you've said, and we all say, Isaac and Gordon and Tonali, please don't get injured because where we would quite be then, goodness knows. But yes, it is a worry. And we won't find out at Eddie Howe's press conference Friday morning who's fit and who's not fit. We'll be told they'll both have late tests and they haven't trained today yet, so we don't know, but we have hope. And then neither of them will get off the coach at the Etihad, or they'll both get off the coach at the Etihad. And that's fine. That's Eddie's way of not wanting Manchester City to know what they're going to be facing. But we desperately need at least one of them to make it. And in an ideal world, we need two of them, don't we?
Yeah, indeed. We will wait and see. I think for me, the other side of that, the frustration is that I'd be really intrigued to see Newcastle United repeat the same formation that they did against Arsenal in the League Cup, because it works so well. Five at the back with one of the centre backs then pushing into that kind of defensive midfield area to pick up any scraps, and it works so well. One of the best tactical performances I've seen under Eddie Howe, and obviously Newcastle made it to a cup final that worked that well. And I think, against a side like Manchester City, if you haven't got Joe Linton to do that hybrid maneuver that he did earlier in the season and did it very well, then playing the five at the back with your three centre backs would have been absolutely perfect. But as it is, he might not have the luxury of that. And that does then pose a question, does he stick with three in the middle and it's Longstaff who comes in, who didn't have the best of games against Birmingham? Is it Lewis Miley who comes in and partners Tonali and Bruno? I mean, for you, John, what would be the right decision?
Well, what about Willett coming in after his two goals at Birmingham?
Well, I'm thinking because obviously we also wait on Anthony Gordon as well, and Eddie Howe was a little bit more optimistic about him, and he said hopefully he'd be in contention. I mean, there's
I'm
so many
certain
ifs
I'm
and buts,
certain
isn't there?
Gordon will play, Andrew. I'm certain Gordon will play. He just felt the tightness and a bit of drama does nobody any harm from Eddie's point of view or whatever. But I would fully expect Gordon to play. And then if you go with a flat back four, which is the normal way of doing it, and you do it because you're shy of a centre half or something, if Botman and Burns not there, then you certainly go with Bruno and Tonali, who's the third one. It would be very difficult to not make it Willock, after he scored two goals at Birmingham. And how do you drop Willock and bring Longstaff in, or drop Willock and bring Miley in? His confidence. I've been disturbed by his performances this season. I think they've been lackluster a lot of the time, and that's disappointed me because he's a quality player when he gets his confidence going and gets his legs going. But I mean, perhaps that came with what happened at Birmingham when he got the winner and had 2 goals. Whether that was over the line or not, he's got 2 goals. Look in the record book; that'll tell you whether it was over the line or not. And it would be very difficult to leave him out. So I think Willock would probably get in as the third midfielder.
Yeah, I think many people would agree with you. I mean, we're going to say Gordon's fit, and that obviously then probably does put Willock into the middle. If Gordon isn't fit, there's probably an argument to put Willock onto the left and then move Miley Longstaff into the role that has been vacated by Joe Linton. But yeah, it's probably a bit of a now or never kind of scenario with Joe Willock. Now is his time because he's not going to get too many opportunities in the first team. And what an opportunity it would be to put himself firmly in the thinking of Eddie Howe with a good performance against Manchester City and to build on those 2 goals he scored against Birmingham. Long may that continue. We'll go to the goalkeeper now, John, because Nick Pope obviously started against Birmingham. He made a couple of saves. He was beaten by an absolute worldie from the Birmingham midfielder. Does he come back in or does he stick with Martin Dubravka?
Stick with Martin Dubravka for me. For a start, you can't ask the fella to give up his oil well in Saudi and give up his retirement pension and stay at Newcastle, then 2 weeks later throw him out when he's made no mistakes of any consequence. Goalkeepers, you can always look at them on every goal and say, could the goalkeeper have done better? But no, I think, Nick's got to earn his place back in the side. I thought he did well against Birmingham, but it was against Birmingham. It was League One. It was his first game back. You've got to stick with Dubravka at this stage. Dubravka has been part of a long run which saw them win. Was it 9 on the trot, etc. For me, and Eddie has a history of being loyal. For me, I would stick with Dubrovka and Nick Pope gets in when he can get in, and the chance will come. I know he'll be twitching like a fried egg with the League Cup final coming up, having missed the last one, but so did Dubrovka. And they both want to play in the League Cup final. But right now, playing Manchester City, the next team in front of us, I would stick with Dubrovka. Then, for me, your decision is who plays right back.
That's what I was going to get on to. Let us know in the comments your thoughts on the goalkeeper situation, the midfield 3, and now as we're about to talk about the situation at right back. John, I've been Livermento's biggest fan. Very nearly opened up another fan club after I closed the Miggy one down. I haven't quite got to that stage yet, but a lot of people are
Tino's
saying,
delighted for that, by the way. Tino's delighted for that in case you put the jinx on him.
yeah, a lot of people have said Kieran Trippier should be starting against Manchester City, but it kind of goes back to the point about the formation. I think Trippier stood out so well against Arsenal because the formation suited him. Playing the 5 at the back, it suited him. It was his game, really. You play 4 against City's pacey and tricky wingers. Does Kieran Trippier manage to put in such a strong performance? I'm not too certain that he does, and that's the only reason that I'm not 100% going Tino Livramento is on the bench. I do think he will be on the bench. I do think Eddie will start Kieran Trippier. Whether it goes as well as it did against Arsenal, I don't think it will do. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, more or less yours. I thought Trippier was terrific against Arsenal. It was a different role he was playing from a flat back 4 with him an out and out right back. City always play tricky winners, whether it's Doku or whether it's Grealish, who went off injured against Real. And suspicion is that he may not be fit for us. But they try to play with that tricky outside left. Is Trippier best to face that, or is it Livramento? I think it's a flick of a coin. I'll not be hugely disappointed whoever's left out of it. I think I would possibly go with Livramento. I think a lot of people would go with Trippier, and Eddie might. But I won't cry, whatever the decision is when I get the team sheet. But I think I would probably go with Livramento. We know what's happening with the centre halves. Hall picks himself. Tonali picks himself, Bruno picks himself. I would go with Willock as the third one. I would expect Gordon to be fit, and therefore you go Gordon, Murphy, Isaac.
Yeah, indeed. I think that would be the starting lineup for most. Of course, as we've said, that if Byrne is missing, then it can only be Fabian Schär alongside Emil Kraft, which shows you the lack of options that Newcastle United have got. Just a word, John, on Willis Sula, because I know we've kind of maybe clashed on our viewpoints on the young man. But I suppose the real question is, have we actually found Newcastle United's right wing forward to compete with Jacob Murphy rather than the backup to Alexander Isak?
But it's an interesting question. I thought you were going to say I would found myself the outside right to challenge Murphy and not have to buy one. I was definitely going to say no, but I think he played as well out wide as he did at centre forward. But I thought he played both well at Birmingham. It was by far his best game for Newcastle United since he come for the young man. His pace is blistering. I love his attitude. He's aggressive. He's young. He's not going to be put on by older, more experienced pros, whether they're on his side or they're on the opposing side. All that was refreshing to see. Um, we've got to bear in mind that when he's looked at his best, it's been against Bromley and Birmingham, both of whom are a couple of divisions down. And I suggest that if he plays in any of the next three games, which is away to Man City, home to Nottingham Forest, and away to Liverpool, it'll be slightly tougher than it was at Birmingham or home to Bromley. But I was heartened by what I saw. There is a raw material to work with. There's no question about that. He is nowhere near the finished article, but you wouldn't expect him to be because when he come to us, he was hugely limited in experience. It wasn't as if he was a regular at Sheffield United and we took a chance on him. He wasn't. Um, I thought he was terrific. He almost produced the best goal line clearance of the match when he struck a shot against his own leg and it come out for Wilson to stick it in. And what a shame for the kid. But he did well for us. He genuinely did well for us down there. And I was pleased to see that because there was shoots of possible flowering to come in the future. Um, he's nowhere near a starting position in the Premier League yet. But then we're not talking about that. We're talking about him as a backup, and he's nice to have on the bench. And it'll have done his confidence good, and that's what's needed. But but I felt that he showed more against Birmingham than he did against Bromley, taking away his worldy goal against Bromley. Um, and there was more to work with. And I love his pace, and I love his attitude. He takes no flack from anybody, whether it's physical from a member of the other side. And Birmingham put it about a little bit, and that's fair enough. They're League One side. If to have any chance against the top Premier League side, they're going to have to do that. And they did. And he wasn't going to be buried into that, by the way. And that was good to see. Um, so a good day for him, no question. But I'm not all of a sudden like, call off a search for an outside right, and we don't need anybody to back up Isaac because we've got Usula and Callum Wilson, because Usula's raw and Callum Wilson's was seen and scored and did well down there. But let's not count our pigeons before they come home to roost. I want to see them between now and the end of the season regularly before I think, oh, well, that's good. We've got the old Callum back.
Well, let's talk about Callum Wilson. As you said, they started against Birmingham, came off the pitch just before the hour mark, got his goal as well. And look, we can debate, we can predict what's going to happen, we can suggest he's going to pick up an injury in the next few weeks and that be it again, and blah, 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 blah. But let's just say that he doesn't, and let's say he manages to stay fit. The option that provides Eddie Howe, the change in dynamic that brings to Newcastle United is something really, really crucial, isn't it? Especially going into this run of games ahead of the League Cup final. You like to have the option of Callum Wilson on the bench, a fit Callum Wilson. It just, I don't know about you, John, it elevates me to another level. I feel happier about it if I totally ignore his injury record.
Yeah, which is hard to do, of course. Totally ignore his injury record. I mean, if we had Callum Wilson without an injury problem, we wouldn't need a centre forward to cover Isaac, because he would fight Isaac, as good as Isaac is, for the shirt. And I think Isaac would have to get it because Isaac is a special talent that doesn't come along very often. I mean, he's a racehorse, he's a thoroughbred, he's poetry in motion. He's a creator. He's a finisher. He's got everything. But if we had Callum Wilson, we needn't spend money in the summer on a centre forward to go into the Champions League. If we're hopefully there, we'd have Callum Wilson. And by Jove, that would be enough. But even if we can keep him fit over the next few games and have him available to us against Man City, against Forest, and against Liverpool, then we go into the FA Cup, Brighton, and the League Cup. So if we get them right up to that, I know we still want them beyond that because we're still going for Europe, but it would be wonderful to go down to Wembley and have a fit Callum Wilson on the bench, wouldn't it?
Oh,
It would be fabulous. I then start thinking about that, because I've thought about it so often in the past, and then it doesn't happen, and you're full of disappointment. I mean, what he did when he played against Birmingham was score what is a centre forward's goal, a poacher's goal. Isaac scores worldies. Isaac scores goals where you go, woo, and then Callum Wilson scores centre forward goals like Shiva would score. I mean, the ball come at throat height to him off his own player, surrounded by defenders. Now you can make a mess of that. Dear old Willock, when the ball was pushed out from the back of the net by the keeper, who was standing with his back against the net, on the rebound, which and he didn't know it was going to be given as a goal, was went higher over the crossbar than Johnny Wilkinson when he won the World Cup for England in the rugby union in Australia. I mean, it was incredible. He didn't finish like that, and the way the ball come to him throat high lent itself to him to your Skynet. He got his foot right up high, he stood on top of the ball and played it down. Now that is a proper goal scorer's finish. It doesn't look spectacular. It doesn't look like the worldie they scored, their midfield player, but it's the sort of goal a good goal scorer score. And he did do that. But we always knew that wasn't his luck. He's a very unfortunate young man that he's got the legs, they're great for football, but they're not great for medical science.
yeah. Well, fingers crossed he can stay fit because it would be a huge boost to Newcastle United and Eddie Howe. You mentioned the table, John, and how Man City and Newcastle United are locked together, 41 points. You've got Bournemouth just below in seventh on 40 points, City fourth on 43 points, and you've got a bit of a gap, 6-point gap up to third where Nottingham Forest lie. This is quite a crucial few games for Newcastle United, isn't it, in terms of their Premier League season? Because obviously you beat Manchester City, you go ahead. Forest, there's then on the 23rd. Obviously with the League Cup as well on the horizon, it's a massive few weeks for the season.
Oh, huge, huge. And if you just look at the Premier League for one moment, Andrew, and the drive to try to get in the Champions League, I never mentioned the other European places because hopefully we'll get into one of those. And we'll get into one of those, by the way, if we win one match, and it happens to be the League Cup final. Then you get into the minor European places. We mustn't forget that. But I'm talking about the Champions League. And if we're going to make the Champions League, it all depends what we get out the next 3 games because it's Man City, it's Nottingham Forest who are third, and it's Liverpool who are top. It's the champions, the third, top, and the top. And if we get done on those to any extent and get just a couple of points, then we're off, got catch up to play. But if we get some of the results that we can, if we won at Man City and we beat Forest, regardless almost of the result at Liverpool, we're cooking because Liverpool's going to run away with the title anyway. But and Man City, as I said at the top of the program, used to terrify me and everybody. They don't do that anymore. We can get a result there with the right application. Why can't we beat Nottingham Forest at home? We've beaten them twice this season at their place. So if we got 6 points out of that, the whole thing's a different ball game. But if the 9 points end up giving us a total of 2, or something of that nature, then it's a different ballgame. The whole Champions League thing will be not decided, but will give us a good indication of the next 3 games.
And in terms of the League Cup final, and we know Eddie Howe's already said you got to put it at the back of your mind. We're not thinking about it, but you can't 100% guarantee that. How important, John, is it right now? Newcastle United, standing at the top of the hill, they just want to push the ball down and get that momentum going. It starts with Man City, continues with Forest, Liverpool, off to West Ham with Brighton in the FA Cup. I mean, is it realistic? I mean, it's not, I mean, they've got a chance of going unbeaten through this few games up to the League Cup final, but how important is it to put in good performances, get good results, and make sure that you head into that final with good momentum
Oh,
behind you?
without a shadow of a doubt. If I go back far enough, I remember in '74 when, and I'm mentioning that only because that cup final was Newcastle v Liverpool. It was in the FA Cup, not the League Cup, but it was Newcastle v Liverpool, and we lost 3-0 and were lucky to get nil. We were that poor on the day. Now, what happened was between the semi-final and the final, we took our foot off the accelerator totally. We got beat a lot. We start playing kids that would never normally play in the side, Bomber Blackhall and a couple of others. And we then thought we could go to Wembley against a team like Liverpool, managed by Shankly with Kevin Keegan in it and everybody else, and just turn our game on like a tap. And of course you can't. And we didn't, and we were well covered. So you've got to, in the run up to a final, you've got to hit some sort of stride. And then you just continue. But if you think, right, we've made it. See, what Newcastle thought in '74 is we've made it. We're not going to win anything else, like the league or the League Cup was finished, etc., etc. So we'll just rest our players, keep them fit, and then we'll go out with all guns blazing on the day. You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't turn it off and on like a tap. And so the build up to Wembley is crucial. And it's also crucial when we go to Liverpool not to get murdered, to then play them again a few weeks later. Regardless of what the result is, don't get turned over for 4 or 5 because that'll impact on us and it'll give them untold confidence. So, yeah, but isn't it wonderful? I mean, isn't it wonderful that we're sitting here now and we're talking about Newcastle fighting for the Champions League? And by the way, we could, and I know it's Fantasy Island, but we could go to Wembley twice this season and win both domestic cups. Now, I'll tell you something Arsenal can't do that because we put them out the League Cup and now the FA Cup. And Liverpool can't do that because they can win the League Cup, but out the FA Cup, they got beat at Plymouth. So Liverpool and Arsenal can't win the 2 domestic trophies, but theoretically at this stage we can.
Well, Newcastle, the only team that can still win the domestic treble. Premier League titles not out of the reach so
Now, I
far.
want you to behave yourself. I'm trying to keep a sense of proportion here, and I thought I was pushing me luck having us win both domestic trophies when we haven't done either for about 70 years. You've now got us on the treble.
What can I say? What can I say?
Well,
How's it going to
a little
go?
less.
How is it going to go on Saturday?
Good question. Good question. Uh, First and foremost, we mustn't lose. Secondly, I think it's a real opportunity to win. Um, with the right application, they are a much better team than the current form of 12 defeats and 24 suggests. If we try to showboat or we're just a little bit off our best, De Bruyne and Orleans and Haaland and Foden can take advantage of that. If we go with the right attitude, we've got big players in better form than their big players are. And I know it's hard to think of us winning away again because it will be 7 away on the trot. That's phenomenal. Where on earth did that come from? It's not that long ago we were a hopeless side once we left the Tyne Bridge. Now we could win 7 on the trot. I'm going to take us to win a very close fought game 2-1.
Wow. Yeah. Do you know what? It's funny because it looks a daunting run of games up to the cup final when you've got City, Forest, and Liverpool. But if you ask me the one that I'm most scared about, I'd say West Ham United away. because Newcastle United, just for whatever reason, turn up against the big sides. And I'm including Forest in that because they are deservedly where they are in the league this season because they've been absolutely brilliant. So it's a funny old season, isn't it? I think Newcastle will pick up at least a point at the Etihad. I'm not going to say they're going to pick up a win. I'm going to go with a point, and obviously if they manage 3, then I'll take it. But I don't think they're going to lose. I think it'll be a close game. And fingers crossed, John, your prediction comes in rather than mine. Go on.
I want them to keep going till the end of the game, to keep going because they letting goals late on. They did it against Real Madrid. They can capitulate late on. Keep going, even if we're 1-0 down or we're 1-1, and don't settle for a point. Don't put up the keep going because you can prick the blue balloon, and we have to keep going. Play on their crowd being vulnerable. We've talked about our crowd after we lost 4 home games to some average sides, and will the crowd be up for it? City's crowd's going to be apprehensive on Saturday after what's happened at home to Real Madrid, and knowing Real Madrid's following us a few days later. It's going to be tough. I'm not disputing that, but we went away to Spurs and Manchester United and Arsenal all in 9 days and won them all. And I know that we would say that Spurs and Man United aren't what they used to be, but neither are Man City. Let's have a dip at it. Let's see what happens. I would be decimated if we lost. Like you, I think we'll at least get a draw, but I can't see with the right application and going for 109 minutes, I can see us necking it 2-1.
Fingers crossed they do. Let us know in the comments what you think the score is going to be. Who's going to start at right back? Is Dan Burn going to be fit? Who's going to start in between the sticks? And just pop in any general comments about this show, and I will get back to you. Thank you, as always, for watching. Thank you to John for providing the match preview. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news. And for myself and John, we will see you guys next week.